Right, so 10:30. If you want to turn your cameras on, then that would be amazing. But we are here to talk about how to talk to your audience. Now, I'm going to talk for a little while, and then I'm going to throw it open for any questions or anything you have. Stick it in the chat and we'll come back to it. So my name is Zoe Hanson. I am the podcast lady. I used to be the breakfast radio lady on Heart and Capital stations for about 20 years. I worked on Capital on the South Coast. I worked on Heart on the South Coast. And then they decided to make Heart a national radio station and only put out pretty much national content. So I kept coming back to this idea of people like local, people like a community. They like to hear about things going on that they can go to. So I started a podcast called The So-So Show, which is for Southampton, and it's been incredibly successful. We're now sponsored by Visit Southampton and by West Key. Now, I love audio. I love that if you're driving, it's your mate in the car. If you take your dog for a walk, it's that company while you're there. You go shopping. I was in the supermarket yesterday. I was listening to something. I was learning while I was shopping, not only spending way too much money. So I love the intimacy of it. And I think that audio brings that intimate, personal relationship without sort of having the conversation. And I love that you can build that community as well. And I think that podcasts show it off beautifully. So the first thing to do is to know your audience. So I make podcasts and they're impossible to put together if you don't know who your audience is. So when I have a client come in that wants to make a podcast, so I make lots of podcasts for businesses. And when they first come to me, the first question is, who is your audience? And we're not talking about 54,000 people. We're talking about that one person, that target person that we want to reach. Who are you aiming it at? Who do you want to listen? Who is your audience? And we can give them a name. We can say what time they get up. We can say where they go shopping. We can talk about what they like to do in their spare time. But you've got to know your audience. The answer to who's your audience or who are you trying to reach, the answer is never everyone. Because what you do is you end up with one size fits no one. Now you can put your content together with that person in mind. So you want to know who they are, why you want to reach them, why they should be interested in you, and what is the problem that they have that needs solving. So with a podcast, what I always say is it needs to inform, educate, or entertain. Now, it might do a couple of those, but it needs to do at least one of those, because otherwise you're just flailing around in the dark, really. Whenever you're making content, go back over it and ask yourself, does this hit that target market? Is this talking to the audience? If it's a question that you're posing, so in a podcast, it might be, I want to talk to people about the menopause. What do I do if I'm having a really bad menopause? Well, if you can go back and listen to your podcast and say, does it answer that question? Then you've hit your audience. Also, tease your audience. Okay, so whether this be on social media or networking, whichever story you've got and whichever platform you're using it on, you need to tease your audience. You need to tell them what you're going to tell them in just a sort of short 1 or 2 sentences so that they can buy into the conversation and they keep listening. Whether it's big news or there's a launch or there's a live, give them lots of love and say, this is coming up and this is what I'm going to tell you. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is sort of, I suppose it's podcast specific, but if you're going on like a Facebook Live or Instagram Live, that first 30 seconds is where you tease them and where you hook them in. Because if you haven't got them in the first 30 seconds, they have gone. I know a lot of podcasts will run about 45 seconds of music. I'm gone. I'm done. I've not come here to listen to the music. I can stick the radio on for that. So tease or hook them in, tell them what you're going to tell them so that they can decide whether to stay for the next half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour. The other thing to do is cut the faff. I haven't come onto Facebook to hear why you've popped on and why you haven't been live for the last month. I haven't noticed, right? You're just telling me, you're just giving me some sort of excuse in the beginning and it cuts me off again. So cut the faff. You don't need, how are you? Everybody's answer is always fine, right? So, I mean, unless it's sort of completely within the conversation, it's with its, if it adds something to it, great. If not, don't worry, cut the faff, because everybody wants to get to the information, education, or entertainment. If you're doing something like a podcast where there's two of you, or a Facebook Live or a Zoom recording, know the questions and know what answers you're going to get. You don't need to intro everyone. They want to get to the meat of what you're going to be talking about. And keep me listening, you know, halfway through the podcast. Don't worry, we're still going to cover off a little bit further on. Tell stories. It creates a massive connection with you, and people can put themselves in that position as well. There's nothing like audio to build pictures. I know that we read stories and we build that picture in our minds, but if you're out taking the dog for a walk and you're telling a story and you're building the picture of I don't know, a day in Amsterdam, fill it with the sights, the smells, the noise, the everything, the feeling is what you get. It creates connection, but it also creates trust. So, stories create that empathy, so they know how you were feeling at that point. And it's so much better. It creates an emotional connection. And also, only talk to one person. So if you are making a podcast and this is audio, you are that person talking straight into somebody's ear. If you're talking to one person, you will create that trust. You will create that connection with someone because you're only talking to them and they feel special. If you go onto a podcast and you say, hi, everyone, you've somehow it manages to just sort of take that trust away. It stops that connection so much. Make it personal. Oh, James, are you saying bye-bye?
No, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Who was your persona? Was it a real person? Is it one person? Does it change? Tell us about your version of that.
Sorry,
the person that you were speaking to. Was it someone with a name or was it an idea of someone?
So yes, it's an idea of someone. I think it is. For me, it is. But
can you describe them? Do they wear a hat? That's what I'm
yes,
getting at.
Exactly that. So when I'm talking about this, we come straight back to that. Know your audience. You know, so hello, you. I hope dog walk's going well and you haven't ended up in a muddy field, or, you know, you're talking to that one person.
It wasn't Sharon from accounts.
It was at one point, yeah.
I'll shut up now. Bye.
No, it's all right. It's okay. That's good. So yes, to create that intimate place, that's what we need to do, is start with know your audience and talk to them, but only one of them. So there we go. There we go. Do we have any other burning questions at the moment? Okay, well, I shall tell you about what's going on with me then. So because I've been making lots of podcasts for lots of businesses, I've realized that lots of people would like to make a podcast, but they don't really know where to start. So I've set up an in-person course, and it's coming on May the 12th. I will teach you how to plan, record, edit, produce, market your podcast. And it's going to be lots of fun. Very limited numbers. But if you get in touch, then hopefully we can sort you out with all of that stuff. Does anybody here make a podcast? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. And how do you feel about that? Do you enjoy it, or is it just becoming a bit laborious? Or
yeah, I enjoy mine.
how often do you put out a podcast, Anna?
Every week. I alternate interview one week and a shorter solo the next week.
And what's your podcast all about?
Crossing the content chasm. So helping people create content that are a bit nervous about doing it. Amazing.
Well, and what do you do? So you do one on your own. So is that sort of like an educational podcast?
Yeah, it tends to be more sort of tips and advice. So the person that I interview, it's normally on a specific topic. So the week before last, I did video and talk to someone who's doing video, and then I reflect on the previous topic, talk a little bit about my experience on it, and then give some tips and advice just to back up what the other person said.
That's great. Perfect. Are there any burning questions?
I was just wondering where it's best to publish podcasts generally. Is there one particular platform that kind of pushes the content onto Apple as well as Android and Spotify, or do you need to publish to each provider individually?
No. So we use, all of the different businesses that I work with, we use Anchor FM, we use Acast, we use Buzzsprout. Now, all of those will push it to Spotify automatically, but Apple, you have to take the RSS feed, and then you just have to take another step with Apple, but actually they're all right. James?
We use Anchor and it goes straight to Apple Podcasts as well.
Because you started at the beginning.
Oh, okay. So if you play around with the settings, I just go to right. Okay.
Yes. There you go. Podbean pushes it out to all as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
So quiet. Hang on. I know what we've got to do.
We're quiet because we've all sort of lost our voices from producing podcasts by the sound of it.
Right. Hang on. Everybody smile.
And we are posting on chat
for the gram.
I think the thing with a lot of these things, it's like content production in general, whether it's writing blogs or podcasts or videos, all the rest of it. It's the you mentioned earlier about the fact that a lot of people want to come to you and say, "Can you help me to produce a podcast?" And they think it's a matter of buying a microphone, having a chat, and the world will listen. So again, there's a number of things there that you've mentioned, which I find really, really fascinating and applies to me. And that's the thing of it's, I always talk about, and I might talk about this later in some of the sessions that I do, but there's a difference between people who love to do something and love the idea of doing something.
Yeah.
And there's a massive difference. And the little story I tell with regards to that is somebody goes to a concert, gets chatting to the guitarist afterwards and says, oh man, I'd love to be able to play the guitar like you. And the guitarist turns around and says, no, you love the idea of playing the guitar like me. Otherwise, you'd be practicing 4 or 5 hours a night like I do. And it's the same with things like podcasts. It's not just about the conversation or the chat. It's about the fact that you've got to put it out there in the world, and you've got to market it, and you've got to talk to people and connect with people and find people, and you've got to do the, the scripting and the story writing. Now, I'm not trying to make it overcomplicated. I'm sure you simplify it really nicely. But again, that's the thing with regards to the commitment and the consistency that people have been talking about, and that's where it grows. Another thing, the lucky few might do this, hockey sticks, but hockey stick growth. But most of us, we're just putting it out there to those single avatars that you were talking about before. And again, the one bit of advice that was given to me early on, which I thought was really good. And I'm lucky; my podcast is going pretty well, and has created some great vibes for me. But again, it's that thing of, I've had people come to me and say, I get 20 or 30 listens on my podcast, and I go, fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, that doesn't sound great. And I go, imagine standing in front of an audience of 20 people.
Yeah.
And they're listening to every word. And I think, oh yeah.
Exactly. And I think the problem is when people come into podcasting, they think they're going to get millions. There's online courses, make your podcast, monetize your podcast. And I'm like, don't say that. It's not going to make anybody any money for a long while.
Or certainly not in a direct way. Do
Yes.
you know what I mean? I think this is, you're absolutely right. I've seen far too many people jump on, and again, same sort of thing. And they either reach out to me or in groups that I'm on with regards to this type of stuff. And you see the thing of, I've published 3 episodes and I've had 48 downloads. When can I start making money and find advertisers?
Yeah.
What?
Exactly. But what it can do is build so much trust for your business, for your brand, and you speak to them you come from a personal place, you speak to them intimately, then you create the connection and they come to you for that. You become that trusted person. I make a podcast for an accountant, and I'm like, I don't know about that one, right? That's going to be tough work, right? But actually it works. And what he's doing is he's telling people how to do things. And that creates the trust for them to come to him and say, can you do my books for me?
Exactly.
But don't put it out there in the world and expect millions of downloads, because my mum listened to my first one 6 times. Do you know what I mean? Like, getting me anywhere.
Bless the mums.
James.
The bit that we found is particularly helpful, because Al, you're absolutely right. Our podcast gets an all right audience. But if I just based it on YouTube views and listens through, it's a couple of hundred people. It is, but like you're saying, Al, that's still a lot of people that are bothering to give that time. I think we all haven't we all got to be really aware of the fact that who's got time to listen to everyone's podcast? You don't. The thing that's made the difference to us and really helps justify the time and effort is the little breakout clips, because we get as much traction from posting those. So if you're not doing that, anyone that's listening, if you're not it's another thing though, isn't it? I always think, yes. I've got to get a couple of clips out of it. It's another piece of work, but often you get as much engagement from that. I think Trish is going to jump in there.
I was speaking to somebody.
Can I just come back quickly on what James said? Because I had a revelation, James. Yesterday, I looked at my YouTube channel. Which is a work in progress still. SEO, hate it. Anyway, I spotted I had repolished episode 2. I'm now on episode 111 of my podcast. I repolished episode 2, which was Trevor Young. Now, I love all my guests, and I don't put them in a hierarchy, but I am canny enough to realize that certain people have a wider spread and are, if you like, a bigger name globally. And Trevor Young is one of them. So I thought I'll just repolish this and I'll redo the little clip as a YouTube short.
Yeah.
of all my 2 views, 1 view, half a view over 5 years or whatever, suddenly 63 views, just like that. And there was nothing fancy about it. I didn't do any fancy graphics or anything. So those YouTube shorts, if you make sure that you size them correctly for, vertical, and they will automatically go to the shorts section, because that's where YouTube funnel them, which is all new stuff that I learned on my creative journey. You could well snap a sudden little burst and possibly then interest in your podcast, full stop. There we go. Just a little tip out.
Just on the clipping things out, they work on social media to bring people through or just get that piece of information. So I know we were talking about, having 20, 30 listens to your podcast. Those 20 or 30 listens to your podcast are probably worth about 20 or 30,000 likes on LinkedIn, because people are buying into you and your brand. Never disregard podcasts and how much trust and connection they make. They are absolutely massive. And the clips as well. So the So Show, we use a thing called Audiogram. So we don't video the podcast because mainly we look terrible when we're doing it. But what we do is we use a thing called Audiogram. So we just put up a picture and it sends the radio waves across the center and it puts up the captions, and those work amazingly well for us as well. So it may not be a video clip, but it will be audiogram. The other thing that you can do with a podcast is you can transcribe your podcast and use it on your website for SEO. Use it as a blog. Hey, Any other tips for marketing? Anybody got anything else? Anna, what do you do?
Well, I found when I launched, my launch marketing worked really well, which was really behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I showed like what microphone I'm using, the software. I did a demo of StreamYard. I did all sorts of really behind the scenes. People were helping me pick my photos and cover graphics and what music, and that went really well. I got really great engagement with that. And I find with my marketing, particularly on LinkedIn, the best posts are ones where I'm really honest and talk about my own journey as well. So just done one on video, which is I'm really rubbish at video, really rubbish. And so I had someone on that video last week, and then I talked about how bad. I mean, like my first video I ever took, it was 137 takes. So I'm absolutely terrible at it. I mean, we're down to about 10. So I just talk about it honestly, because a lot of people really struggle with a lot of the content marketing topics, and really with the they see like Gary V and they think he's all polished and everything, and they have to be like that when actually they don't. So
and actually we prefer it when they're not, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It creates that connection again, doesn't it? We all like to see people or know that they are real. Everything I think right now is all about realness, all about authenticity, everything.
Yeah.
In fact,
I think the thing with that's really comment about the comment about Gary V, I found really interesting, because we all know the whole thing about social media and the whole essence of it's really easy to get caught in a trap of comparison. Oh, if I'm going to compare, I mean, we've had references to Joe Rogan in the chat and whatever, and it's hilarious. Again, it's so true. I was speaking with some connections the other day with regards to them building a podcast, and they're famous people, and we talked about the whole Joe Rogan thing. We said we're not trying to replicate Joe Rogan. And the thing with Gary V, the same thing. It's easy to get caught up in this, I've got to be like him. The issue is that if you're just like him, I might as well watch him.
Yeah.
So it's about you being you, and it's finding your way of doing it and the stories that you've got to tell. That's why people are listening. That's why people are connecting.
And if you watch Gary Vee's first videos, they're rubbish. They're not like they are now. He's got a production team now, and his, the first ones are him sitting behind a desk rambling on. It's people see what's now rather than what was in the past, and they think that they have to be polished. I'm a copywriter, so I read things like Harry Potter, and I spot all the grammatical errors and the issues in them. But I remember when I first read them when I was a lot younger, and I looked at them with rose tinted glasses. I didn't notice anything. And the same with content. I look at other people's videos. I'm like, oh, it's amazing. And then I go back and rewatch, and they're umming and ahhing like me. And there's cats in the background waving away. And I always try to take those rose tinted specs off when I'm looking at things and try and get it a bit more real.
Yeah, perfect.
Probably also worth mentioning, Gary Vee is an interesting case study because everything that he does would only works because he supports it with engagement. Because I think a lot of people fall into the trap, and it's like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast because I want marketing output. I want to broadcast and I want people to listen. If you then don't get into the conversations with people, interact with their stuff, nothing happens.
Yes.
That's what we've learned. And that's the whole point about the fact that if you've got an audience of 30, if you talk to them, if I put you in a networking room with 30 people and they hung off of every word that you said, you get into a conversation with them. But people miss that bit. They just want to broadcast and not put the effort in. It's a relationship building tool, isn't it? And that's how Gary's built what he's done so well.
Absolutely. And again, spot on. I love that. I really love that whole essence of, it's a two-way street. That's what connection's about, right? So it's about the two-way thing. But again, it comes down to, we've all got podcasts here. Now, again, somebody said that they've got 148 episodes or whatever. Mine's my current one. I did over 100 on a previous podcast and I think I'm on about 48, 49 now. If we all went to each other's and tried to listen to, even at 2-speed, and tried to listen to, we'd be there for about 3 weeks, just, listening to them overnight. But find that one or two that resonates, go and have a look. But more importantly, and this is a tip for all of us, is if you hear something that resonates, who is the first person, one person that comes to mind when you're listening to it? Share it with them. Not the whole podcast, here, I expect you to listen to the whole series. That one episode that you go, thought of you when I heard this, and I just want to send it to you. Not only does it help the person you're sending it to, it helps you because you feel good. And of course, it helps the podcast host. So, if there's one thing to take away from this is, how do we share this stuff? Do you know what I mean? That's what Connection's all about to me.
Perfect. That is a great note to end on. Coming up, because we're teasing ahead, Nikki Forster is coming up about creating an online course. I will leave you with that. Thank you so much. I am the podcast lady. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Zoe.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, everyone.
Love it. Thank you.
How do I do this?